All right, folks, let's get started here. It's about 10:04. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Michael Hinton. I'm honored to be the president for Miami-Dade County and Monroe County. That's the CCIM District, which is part of the larger Florida chapter of CCIM. CCIM is a certified commercial institute member. At the core of our group is education, and we are an educational institute, part of the National Association of Realtors. So we are an international organization, and we are tasked with raising the bar in higher education with commercial real estate practitioners. So we have appraisers, we have lenders, we have a lot of related industries besides just real estate brokers. In the Miami-Dade chapter, or the Miami-Dade district, we have about 150 members, and honored to be, again, the president. We will have some of our other members on the board joining us today. And we have a great panel set up today. This is, to me, valuations is a cornerstone of all the real estate transactions and what we do on a daily basis. So we're very honored to have Pedro Garcia, who is the Miami-Dade County Tax Assessor. We also have Sabrina Robinson, Stearns, Weaver, and Miller, who handles tax assessments and valuations. And we also have Mick Stixma, who is an appraiser. And so we're going to get a variety of input on what's going on with Miami-Dade and the market right now. So thank you all for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. So let's start off, Pedro Garcia, let's start with, what are we talking about as far as the big value of all the private property that we have in Miami-Dade County? We've got condos, warehouses, retail, high-end Class A buildings in Brickell. We've got marinas. What are we talking about, the total value of everything? What are we talking about in Miami-Dade?
Okay, we're talking about non-governmental properties. Mm-hmm. We have a total value, just value of $411 billion.
Wow.
And a taxable value and $308 billion of the taxable value.
$308 billion in Miami-Dade County. That it is amazing. And your office, your team, tell us about what you do with the tax assessor's office. Give us a little preview of what you do through your office.
We establish all the values from January 1st back. So we establish the values looking at the market and some of the properties like residential and condo properties. And we use an income approach when we're talking about commercial properties and industrial and anything rental. That's what we do. We handle the agricultural exemptions. We handle all the exemptions for the homestead, for the seniors, for the long-term. And we also handle all the disabilities exemptions that we have. We have the veterans disabilities. So we handle a lot of also the TPP or personal property. So we do a tremendous job 365 days in a year.
Wow. And how many people do you have in your team?
Right now we have close to 400 persons.
Wow. That's amazing. Great. And
yes.
A team of 400 people to track $308 billion in properties. So your office probably sees, obviously, all the transactions probably faster in real time than what a lot of other people see. What are you seeing right now? Obviously, we've been in this COVID pandemic for about 4 or 5 months. Are you seeing some trends? What are you seeing coming out of this summer?
Well, so far what we see is a big problem. We see a lot of people unemployed. We see a lot of vacancy units on a lot of commercial properties. We're seeing a lot of vacant space on commercial properties. I've been driving and visiting some of the biggest shopping centers, and you can see a lot of empty space. I don't believe those people are going to come back. And this is going to be a very difficult situation for us to establish the values for 2021. So far, 2020, we complete everything. We have established all the values for as of June 1st. We deliver all that information to all the cities and the county and all the tax districts that they have to receive that kind of information. And also on July 1st, we certificate with revenue. But we're talking about values that were established from January 1st, 2020 back to 2019. So we have all the comparables and we've seen all before there was the crisis with the COVID-19 that we have. And we start seeing that situation is starting by the end of January, February, it start making the move on this crisis. And now we see a tremendous difficulty for most of the owners, how to pay the mortgage. And we've been watching that. To give you an idea, we've been having conversation with all the property appraisers elected property appraisers in the state of Florida to see how we can handle the situation, how we can get together with the legislators and try to see what kind of law, what kind of amendments, or what kind of ideas they will have that we can help all the property owners in not only in Miami-Dade County, but in the entire state of Florida. And I believe they're going to be doing the same thing for the entire United States.
So, so the county puts together their budget, the cities put together their budget, and they turn to you for the valuation, and then those municipalities will set their millage rate. Is that correct? That's
correct.
Okay. So you don't really, you're kind of insulated. Do you feel pressure because these other municipalities are going to be, you know, they're going to be showing less money coming in this next coming year or two. But you're tasked with just setting the value. Is that correct?
That's it. We're going to be establishing the value. We're going to be working, getting as much information possible from the owners of all the rental units. We're talking about apartment buildings, commercial shopping centers. And what we are doing now, we are planning and we are preparing to send letters to every one of them to get as much information from them when we're talking about financial information, rentals, what kind of vacancies they have on their property at this particular time, what's happening to them on the maintenance on those buildings, what is the expenses they're going to have on those buildings. And we're going to have to be very careful when we establish the income for next year.
So with CCIM, we talk about educating people with three ways of setting a value, which is cost or replacement value, an investment income approach, and a sales comparison. Which one of those three, or do you use a combination of those three when you set values?
We will use a combination. When you're talking about residentials and condo, you have to use comparables. You don't go by the income. But when you're talking about shopping centers, apartment buildings, definitely the income will be the heavy thing that we're going to be looking at, because how much that property will be worth will be the difference, and whatever they get in on rentals and how much they're going to be spending. And from there, we're going to establish a cap, and we get the cap from the market. So we're going to be working on that to see how, with the legislators being under the law, that we can help everybody. And I see this like a big storm. And, you know, we're going to have to come out with new ideas how to work and make everything feasible for everybody and helping everybody.
I mean, that's the beauty of real estate. It historically is always held or appreciated year after year. Obviously, you know, 2008, 2009, 2010, we saw devaluation. So you think we're going to see some more devaluation at the end of this year, possibly next year?
What I see is for 2021. This year, we established already the values of all those properties. And we're going to be talking to the legislators to see if they can come out with some ideas maybe giving a break on the taxes to the people, or giving a way that they have no penalties. I mean, it's very early to see exactly what we can do under the law, but we're gonna have to do something because the people need our help. And I'm sure the legislators, we are in the middle of an election right now, but we are talking to some of them that we know for sure they're gonna be elected. And also with all the elected property appraisers in the state of Florida. And definitely we're gonna come out with some ideas that we're gonna try to help the people.
Great. That's a great transition. Let's jump over to Sabrina. And so we have a client that gets their tax bill and they think it's high, they think it's wrong, and then tell us how you come in your team. So let's see what we can do with that. Welcome.
So you may think the relationship between my practice group and the property appraiser's office is an adversarial one, but really it couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, our practice and the property appraiser's interests are very much aligned. What we're both seeking is to arrive at a fair market value for the taxpayers. Certainly, that doesn't mean we always agree, otherwise I wouldn't have a job. But we enjoy a great relationship with Pedro Garcia's office, and we appreciate the ability to be able to reach out, have meaningful conversations with the mutual goal of arriving at a fair and equitable resolution for issues for our clients. I don't know if Mr. Garcia will recall this, but I've had the unique opportunity to work with Mr. Garcia for years, not only in his role as the property appraiser, but when I first started in this practice 16 years ago or so, and I'm a 30+ year practicing attorney, Mr. Garcia was a special magistrate. And I had numerous opportunity to appear before him advocating for taxpayers. And he brought the same level of expertise, knowledge, and thoughtful reasoning when adjudicating those cases as he does in his role as the property appraiser. And I think you can hear that when he discusses the problems we're all facing with COVID and his desire to help the taxpayer. Clearly, it's going to have to come from the legislature down, because the property appraiser doesn't have the ability within his role to go ahead and say, well, we're not going to institute penalties, or we're going to extend the payment deadline. But clearly he recognizes there's a need to be helpful to our taxpayers. The property appraiser, as you heard, is tasked with an incredibly difficult job. They value in close to 1 million properties a year with a value of over $300 billion. And the way they undertake their task is on a macro level, and they mass appraise. So this is where our respective practices differ, and our practice group and skill set benefits our clients, because we have the luxury and the ability as tax counsel to be in the unique position of doing a deep dive on each property. We utilize our deep resources in-house, our relationships, we understand the performance, looking at, a historical perspective of property for years, and that, along with outside sources like Mixed Stigma, we are able to understand how our clients' properties values relate to what the market values are. And this puts us in an excellent position to enlighten the special magistrates that hear our cases when we're advocating on behalf of a client for a reduction in value. This ability to utilize a very hyper-focused analysis versus a mass appraisal approach, which the property appraiser, don't get me wrong, has no choice but to use in a county that's as large as we are, results in our office achieving substantial reductions for our clients that have properties that they believe are overvalued. In the 2019 tax year, we were able to achieve $340 million in reductions in market value, which equated to $5 million in tax savings to our clients.
Sabrina, sorry, you have some slides you want to bring those up, or you want me to bring them up for you?
We can do that.
Okay, keep going. Sorry, I didn't interrupt. Keep going.
So as far as COVID, which is obviously the big elephant in the room, unfortunately for our taxpayers, they're not going to see the effects of COVID on their valuations for this tax year coming up, and these trim notices that they're going to receive in about 4 weeks. And I know it's such a difficult time for them because really the impact of COVID is far reaching. Unemployment rate is soaring. The retail apocalypse has hastened. Retail was in a state of distress in many areas before COVID, and now it's just exploded. The amount of bankruptcies being filed, the amount of store closures, stores that will probably never reopen is massive. The hotel industry, the hospitality industry, has just been hit so incredibly hard. They were virtually out of business from mid-March until the reopening just several weeks ago. And this reopening now, unfortunately, has been met with a surge in cases again. So travel to what would be a beach destination, we are now a hotspot. The travel is going to be completely limited. These hoteliers are really suffering. And as Mr. Garcia said, vacancy, you look at these restaurants who are now operating on not even 50% capacity anymore. It was stepped back again to only outside dining. There was so little opportunity then for them to survive that. Vacancy in office space. I can tell you, we take up 6 stories basically of a 26-story office building in downtown Miami. No one is in my office. And I don't know if that's going to change the way people occupy offices. It may change in the future for that. But for this tax year, we have to remember the property appraiser is looking at a January 1st valuation date and the trailing income for 2019. And with most sectors, other than probably the retail sector, we were in a hardy economy. And that doesn't mean there's not room for reductions, because I think by talking about 2019, where we were able to obtain reductions and also a robust year, there are always going to be properties that the taxpayer believes are overvalued. And perhaps when you look at it on a micro scale like we do, you're going to be able to support reductions in value.
How many, you said you have a team? How many in your team?
So I had the Avalon Tax Department at Stearns Weaver, a 30+ year attorney, fell into this area, practiced about 17 years ago. That's all I do now. We have a 12-member team. We have a statewide practice. We have 8 lawyers on our team, four non-lawyers. We have in-house appraisal. I hope Mr. Garcia forgives me, our director of valuation. We kind of reeled in from the Miami-Dade County Property Appraiser's office. It gives us great insight as to how the property appraiser's office operates. So it's a good tool to look at a big picture when we're looking how to guide a client. We have a land use department, and we also have geographic information systems department. So it gives us the ability in-house to perform a very broad spectrum of services in-house, which most practices probably don't have that ability. And then we have the ability to go outside, where we've utilized outside services of appraisers like mixed services. We have great relationships with clients that are also brokers. So we have the ability to really understand an entire market, and they're able to feed us information that is maybe not so easy for the average person to go ahead and investigate, but we have that research at our disposal.
Sure, and I think you've got a slide with some timeline dates that you want to go through those.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think that's important. So TRIM notices will go out. That's slide number 9, I think.
There we go.
There we go. One more. There we go. So the TRIM notices come out about the 3rd week of August. Everybody will receive those notices, and it will give the values of the properties. Really, for many counties, Miami-Dade County included, values are already posted on the property appraisers' websites. The window of time to file a petition is very brief, though. Once these TRIM notices come out mid-August, there is about a 25-day window to file petitions with the Value Adjustment Board. And although in Miami-Dade County, there is good cause if you need to file a late petition, if there's some reason you couldn't file your petition timely, that ability is not in every county. So really, it's very important for people to timely file their petitions. Once a petition is filed, hearings will start in about October. In Miami-Dade County, because they receive such a large amount of filings, those hearings run through April. They're set by the Value Adjustment Board clerk. We don't have any control over when they're set. And they're set on a rolling basis. We get 25 days notice for a hearing. And that's how we proceed through the year. It's a very, very busy time frame between October and April. We're in hearings basically every single day of the week.
So quick question, will those hearings go virtual in this pandemic, or is that up for discussion?
I think that's the big question. I can tell you that when the light switch went off in March and we were basically forced to close down everything, we did go a modification of virtual. We actually had phone hearings for the middle of March to the middle of April. So my hope would be that the Value Adjustment Board is taking this time, and let me point out, it's outside the control of the Property Appraiser's office. It falls to the Value Adjustment Board's control. My hope is that rather than telephonic hearings, we will have virtual hearings where we can actually be able to visually see the special magistrate and the property appraiser. I personally think that would be very important for fair hearings for the taxpayer. It's very difficult over the telephone when you've submitted information to be reviewed that can be 100 to 150 pages. And as prepared as we are, and we had very successful results over our phone hearings, we submitted all of our evidence in a way that was manageable, indexed, paginated, tabbed. But it's still so much better when you can face-to-face see somebody and see that they're on the same page with you. But it's wait and see.
And then, so the bills go out, go ahead, and then you got March 31st, taxes are be due at the beginning of next year.
So March 31st is the date that taxes are due to be timely. In Florida, that we have the benefit, if you pay your taxes early, a discount applies. And obviously, if you have a high value property, a discount can be very meaningful. If you pay by the end of November, the discount is 4%, the end of December, 3%, 2%, 1%, and then to be timely, March 31st. I think the hope is, Mr. Garcia touched on this, there's going to be a great need to try and help taxpayers. There is not a general calamity statute that's going to take effect for this aid to taxpayers. It's going to have to be something that the legislature enacts that is pointed toward this type of pandemic. I can tell you that in other states that we track, that certain states have delayed the payment of taxes without causing them to be delinquent. In some states, they've allowed payments to be extended, perhaps with a small interest rate associated to it, but it's not going to affect the valuation of the property. The property appraiser is going to value the property as they've already done. The values are set already, but it's going to be the payment mechanism that hopefully will be looked at hard by the legislature. And you know, it's a weird scenario too in Florida, because truth of the matter is the regular session of the legislature does not take place until March, and taxes are going to be due at the end of March. My guess is that there will be special sessions, and I know that there are active lobbying groups on behalf of retailers, on behalf of hospitality, talking to these legislators. Mr. Garcia just said the appraisers across the state are talking to legislators, but that's where it's going to have to come from. And hopefully that's going to be the case, because you can imagine the devastation. I mean, hotels, for instance, have not been open for months. And even if they are open now, they are seeing so little occupancy, and they're going to receive their tax bills in November. It's going to be a very difficult year for these taxpayers.
And they'll be due in March, which will be almost the 1-year anniversary, and they will have had, or at least we're seeing a lot of, like you said, retailers and hotels, you know, they're going to be vacant and they're going to be struggling, and that will be a whole year, and they're going to be cash strapped by that point. So that's going to be a good. So I want to bring Mick in and have him talk to us and give us some insight. But before we jump away, Sabrina, do you have any predictions that you want to make as far as industrial, retail, multifamily, office land? What's going up? Maybe what's holding? Like, as far as industrial or something like that that you think is I don't want to say COVID impervious, but is going to hold and maintain some things through the next 6 months to a year?
Sure. So I can tell you that we look at taxes on behalf of a whole variety of property types, and the property types that we look at run the spectrum from office buildings, low-income properties, multifamily, industrial properties. So for tax year 2020, again, January 1st, 2020 is the snapshot in time that we look at. We were in a robust economy on January 1st before that light switch was flipped in March. When we look at income producing properties for purposes of valuation, we look at the trailing 12 months. I can tell you at the moment in time of January 1st, many sectors were strong. The hotel industry was thriving. I mean, think about it. We had the Super Bowl in Florida this year. The hotel industry was robust. Retail was distressed. Retail was already distressed. I think they were the exception to the rule, really, of the economy. There's some retail that was doing just fine, but there's a lot of big box retail that was distressed. There was a lot of store closures for anchor department stores. That is only going to be hastened going into the future. You're going to see really a retail demise, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were, I'm sorry, a lot of people were saying, the online, this pandemic pushed us into the future 5 to 7 years in this transition.
100%. I mean, and what you're going to see is two things. So you're going to see a retail demise hasten, but what also you're going to see is industrial. You're going to see, I think, a big uptick. Industrial was super hot for January 1st, 2020. And I think what you're going to see is with the demise of retail and different footprint of retail. So some big box retailers have gone much smaller and they're utilizing industrial space to house inventory and get it out that way. With the advent of the increase of popularity of online shopping. Look, I think this pandemic has showed us, you don't have to leave your house. You can order your groceries, you can order supplies, you can order really whatever it is you need, and it's going to be supplied through, online. And what you need for online then is you need industrial space, and the supply chain is going to run through industrial space. So I think you will see an uptick in industrial. I think, unfortunately, for hotel in the future, 2021, it's going to be a really, truly difficult year. It's going to be a wait and see what happens with office buildings. I think that, there's a feeling out there in some respects that we have survived now 5 months with basically working remotely. And a lot of people have found that productivity is just fine working remotely. So maybe there's a thought process to, well, maybe we don't need quite as much office space as we have. I think it's going to depend on the work environment. For me personally, I appreciate being in the office with my team, collaborating. So my hope is that we're all going to be back soon. And my hope is, when you mentioned that March anniversary date, that come March, we're going to be having a celebration, and it won't be an anniversary date, so to speak. We're going to have moved on from this.
I hope so. Yeah, one of our other webinars, we had Casey Conroy, who talked about retail, and that the Container Store is going to be closing a significant number of their stores, but the ones they're keeping are the ones that they are going to reconfigure for click it and pick up. So they're going to take part of the parking lot and make it a small loading zone. And those are the stores that are doing well, that you can buy it online, go 2 hours later and pick it up. And honestly, I bought my camera the same way from OfficeMax. I bought it online, and 45 minutes later, I honked my horn and texted them, and they brought it out to me.
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of adaptation that we're going to need to see in retail. So
I can tell you, as another example of that, Best Buy had its stores closed. They had curbside pickup for a long time, and in talking to them, they had said that it was on their agenda to roll out curbside pickup, just like you were saying, click it and pick it up. And this hastened their rolling out of this. So there was already a thought process, and it's helped them to remain, to survive this pandemic, really.
Sure. All right, Mick, let's see what you've got from your thoughts and on what's going on with the appraisals. Let me switch the screen here so I can bring up your slides. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I am Mick Stixma. I am the managing partner for CRE Valuation Services. And although we operate in the United States, throughout the United States and the Caribbean, our headquarters is here in Miami. So we have an affinity for this local market area. And in fact, one of our principals is very active in Monroe County. So we have actually a really good depth of knowledge and connections in Miami-Dade and Monroe County. I am an MAI, which some people often ask me, what is that? So it is the highest designation for an appraiser within the United States. And I also hold the designation from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, which is more of an international designation. And that is reflective of a lot of the Caribbean work that we do. Do you want me to just generally?
You tell me when you want me to advance the slides. Keep going.
Okay, well, we'll with the slides. So this is just some screenshots that basically show you each market, each segment, and you can see that we've put the where we could, we've included the Miami area, the Palm Beach area, and the Fort Lauderdale area. And where there was enough data, we also included Monroe County, but that's just it's a very small market, so there's not a lot of data there. You can tell the orange line, the big one, that's obviously or actually in this situation, retail is actually higher in, I think it's Broward County, if I'm not mistaken.
Fort Lauderdale, yeah.
Fort Lauderdale, yeah. And so you have a situation where, I went back a year, and then also the forecast is a year forward. And you can see that as kind of Sabrina had mentioned, is that they use a trailing 12. And if you were to just, close your eyes and not really look at what's happening today and what might happen in the next year, you would think that we're in a fairly normal market. You can see that there's straight line appreciation. It's not super strong, but it's in the upward direction for the most part. And this is retail. So this is already reflecting the fact that retail has already taken a fairly big hit. So this is sort of the new normal of retail right now. So because this is showing the last year, I would also just sort of on a counterpoint with the retail side. One of the things that we've also seen is, traditional retail has definitely taken a big hit, and that's outside of COVID-19. That's just in general. But what we've also looked at is, some of the institutional players and some of the smarter local or regional retail players have repurposed their properties. And so they've been able to survive. And, that's really the art of business, is to, see where things are right now, where they're likely to be headed, and then try and gear your property to that. And I think anybody who's involved in retail really needs to take a good hard look at repurposing any traditional elements of their retail properties. Now, we'll show you each segment, but just to sort of as a universal comment, you can see that the forecast portion, which of course is just people guessing, just speculating, that they believe that the market's going to go down over the next year. Probably fairly realistic present estimate, because as we can see, especially in income producing properties, if your income is dropping during this period of time, then you're going to see a drop in the value. But that's, again, based on historical data. So that's why we haven't quite seen it yet. So we can go to the next slide, which is office. You can see that office is, again, kind of flatlining. There's no real strong indication of which way it's going to go or where it's been. And this one, we do actually have a small representation from, the folks south of us. And they are basically looking at a very similar trend line. Again, this is past year and speculative or educated guessing for the future year forecasting. If you look at the next one, which I think is industrial. You can see that, again, this one has a smaller sort of decline, and this is indicative of sort of Sabrina's comments in the sense that, you know, industrial probably, if I had to guess, has probably the most COVID-19 proof sort of element to it, simply because so many services are being offered through, you know, click it and pick it up, or click it and you know, local storage facilities or warehouse facilities will deliver it. So, you know, if there is now a lot of this has already been built into the market. So I don't think there's any huge necessarily advantage there. I think the next step past that is where we really want to take a look at. And I think our last slide is for multifamily. And again, people still need to live. So this is not going to be affected as much, simply because, you know, people still need to have a place and so on. And there may be some rent decline or people missing their rents or things like that. But in general, people still need to live in the communities that they are existing in. And I'm going to pause here for a second, because the next slide really changes everything. And one of the things that, you know, being in this sort of business for the past 30 years, as I have, we have been through a few different markets up and downs. Florida tends to be pretty resilient, actually, because we get a lot of in-migration from the Northeast. Ohio, Pennsylvania, you know, New York, New Jersey tend to move down, and they help, you know, sort of keep our economy going. But we've seen in other regions like the Pacific Northwest much bigger swings in their values and incomes and so on. And so the closest event that we've all collectively gone through was the 2007-2008 recession. And we learned actually a lot from that particular recession, because it taught us a few things. And if you switch to the next slide, you'll see a rough comparison as to the recession from 2008, 2007. It took approximately 7 years to recover to the point where we were. This is, of course, values. And in our current situation right now, you can see that the speculation is actually 2 years. And so it's a much shorter duration that we're predicting at this point. And the dip is similar, but it is a shorter duration. Again, I'm not a COVID-19 expert. I'm just looking for, you know, possible explanations behind this. My guess is that the 2 years is sort of reflective of immunity issues, herd immunity, vaccinations, when they'll come out, so I have a feeling that that 2 year sort of estimate is based probably more on a scientific process of when we might, as a society, recover from this current pandemic, but I don't know for sure. The thing that I wanted to point out here is, you know, 2 years and 7 years, that's a huge difference in terms of recovery. So it says to me that there is still that sort of pent-up demand that's there. There's a lot of willing and able market participants. It's just that we're all being affected by, you know, guidelines and rules, etc., obviously for our well-being, but it is obviously affecting our business. And so how does this information help us with respect to current valuations, current methodologies, and ways to look at things? So one of the things we learned from the previous downturn was that the market tends to break into almost like a dichotomy of data. And in the previous situation, we had a lot of REO data, which is, if you don't know, it's real estate owned. It's when the bank takes back property, they own it, and then they're now selling it. that's a distressed asset. And what happened is that it flooded the market. So you had a distressed market transaction database, and then you had a regular market transaction database. And so it became very tricky for appraisers to figure out which database did we want to use. Are we just going to use a little dip into both and sort of blend it, or what were we going to do? And so that became a complicated sort of process, which is probably still being discussed today. And we did work through a few scenarios. And so, and I can get into more detail on that if anybody's interested. But how we can apply that to today is we generally have a situation where the 2 years is reflective of a similar situation where we probably anticipate that there will be a dichotomy of data, and that will be people that are not being affected by the COVID-19 shutdown, and then there's going to be others that are significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so you're going to have two sort of parallel market data sources, one that is reflective of the of the pandemic, and one that's not. And so that's going to be a tricky issue. And then, sort of my final point in this quick summary is that in terms of valuation, we typically, so we're looking at the income approach or the investment approach. We're looking at income streams. And so one of the things that is something that we all really going to have to take a deep breath and think about is if we're using direct capitalization, which is just the process of capitalizing 1 year's net operating income, we can see in a downturn that will significantly drop the value of any property affected by lost revenue. The way that we would tend to avoid this sort of anomalous situation is to use a discounted cash flow methodology, which might extend the the projected cash flow over a period of 5 years, 10 years, what have you, and that will help minimize the impact of the anomaly. The problem is we just don't know how deep this is going to be or how long it's going to be, so that becomes tricky. But to be fair, I think in valuations that we're conducting, that when we do start to see this sort of downturn in market data, that we may need to really, even with a simple property, start thinking about a discounted cash flow methodology as opposed to a direct capitalization methodology. And that's my...
So here we are. So I had myself on mute there for a moment. So tell us, where do you, when you're doing your day-to-day research and you're putting together appraisals, where do you find your source of information? What do you use the most of as far as getting and putting together the valuations for the properties you're working on?
So we have a myriad of sources. So we work throughout the entire United States and the Caribbean. But speaking more locally, because our audience is more local, in this particular case, we would use public data sources, private data sources, obviously third-party data sources, and then in-house data sources. And also another important aspect is the owner-supplied data, which can reflect actual financial statements or pro formas, or probably in most cases it's a combination of the two. In an ideal situation, we'd like to see 3 years of financial statements of actuals, and then at least 1 or 2 years of projections or pro forma. And so it's a combination of looking at all of the data together, and then the appraiser, using his analytical skills at that point, is to take a look at the whole aggregate amount of data and to come up with, sort of what they believe is the indicated value for any given scenario, whether that be the lease rates, whether they believe that would be the, operating expense ratios or what have you. So it's a myriad of data sources.
And what kind of customers are you looking for what part of the process for properties that people are looking to acquire and they need appraisers for lending? Or are you doing refinances? What are you seeing in the market right now? Because obviously we're in a very tumultuous time. Are you seeing people looking to acquire properties, refinancing, working on their taxes? What are you seeing the most of right now this summer?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question, because that is very it's a good indication of where the market is, oddly enough. So we haven't seen a tremendous amount of troubled asset valuations at this point yet, although we do anticipate doing that, and especially on the tax side of things with Sabrina is, there is this anomalous situation, so I can see where there's going to be a lot of work in that particular area. However, in terms of our actual, group of, or aggregate group of business, we haven't seen a tremendous amount of troubled assets that we've experienced. Refinance is common, and new acquisitions are, interestingly enough, we are doing new acquisitions. Reaching back again to our history of the 2007-2008 economic downturn, one of the indicators that I saw and started to realize was an interesting indicator of future activity was the either the large or institutional purchase of large tracts of land. And that, we often call it land banking, which is where somebody's buying land for the purposes of redeveloping it or developing it later in a period of time. So they have big pockets and they're able to hold it for a year or 2 years, what have you. But we're seeing a lot of that right now. And so what that tells me is that there's a lot of big money saying, you know what, we see this as sort of an opportunity to come in and buy large tracts of land, and then with the idea of holding it for 1 or 2 years or whatever, and then going through maybe the zoning or rezoning process, and then coming out at the other end in 2 years or so with a piece of land that they purchased at a good value, with it rezoned, and then they're going to develop that property into some sort of mixed use development or what have you. So so I think there is some optimism in there that shows that people are kind of looking forward to saying this is going to be a 1 or 2 year sort of event. And then obviously from a tax perspective, there's some anomalous downward pressure that exists for tax appeal and that sort of stuff.
Great. Let's go finish up. Do you have any more slides here? I'm sorry, I want to make sure we cover your presentation.
No more
Nope.
slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go back there then.
I think the only thing that just looking over my little notes, I think the only thing that one of the questions that was asked was has there been any changes to us in our specific appraisal market? And the only thing that I can really reach into is our inspections have changed. So, again, we're dealing with vacant buildings or minimally occupied buildings, and we're coming into their environment. So, there's sort of the protocols to get into a property to inspect it and so on. And so that's the only significant difference I've noticed.
Great. Sabrina, have you noticed any trends or changes in the last few months as far as like how deals are getting done, or anything that is a direct impact of COVID and how people have had to adapt?
I can tell you, interestingly enough, just within our own office, as I mentioned earlier, we have a very large real estate practice, and trying to keep everybody attuned to what's going on within the office. Our low-income housing tax credit group has closed more deals during this pandemic than I think they closed in the majority of the year last year. It's been huge, and I'm not sure of the reasoning other than there's been opportunity available in that area. And I don't know that that opportunity I don't know that those properties are normally traded as frequently as perhaps multifamily. So these clients have taken advantage of that. We've seen a lot of refinancing, a lot of, especially large, significant, high-end valued properties. They're working with their lenders, and thankfully lenders are working with these clients. Look, they don't want a revisit of 2007, 2008, where these lenders were taking back properties left and right, and they found themselves in a whole new area of business as, you know, like as property owners. That's not really where they want to be. So they're working with these clients, and we see a lot of refinancing going on right now.
Great, thanks. Pedro, do you see any particular trends as far as a particularly great area in Miami-Dade that's doing a lot of activity or a lot of transactions that you see coming out of this the next 6 months or a year? Is there a section of the county that we should be looking at that we're not? Oh, gotta unmute you. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, you're muted. Hold on one second. You're still muted. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay,
There you
can
go.
hear me now?
There you go.
Okay. We have a little bit of problem here on the.
It's okay.
On the
Glad you're
government.
It's okay. Glad you're back.
Okay, what we see, some of the bigger companies are buying a lot of land, holding that for future development. We've seen a lot of the banks are communicating with the owners of the property, try to work something with them. It's going to be a complete difference of what we have with the years 2009 to 2012 when we got the bubble. I believe the banks learned the situation that they have in that particular year. They're going to be working with most of the owners. And what we see also on the new construction, most of the companies, they already get their financing and they're using the money to keep building. So we don't see any problems on new construction for next year. I believe they're going to be as close as we have it this year, that we have like $8 billion in new construction and coming in on to Miami-Dade County and the entire county. And we don't see that problem for next year. I believe the new construction will be very close to what we have this year.
Mm-hmm. And I think perhaps that was on my question earlier, but I'm not sure if we answered it. How many transactions does Miami-Dade see on average a year? Because we talked about 308 billion in private, and how many of those trade every year?
Well, listen,
Around 100,000.
100,000 transactions a year in Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's
Remember,
amazing.
this is a Yule, and you have a lot of investors coming in from South America, from Europe, and it's a lot of action, and we have a lot of great realtors working in the Miami-Dade County area, and it's a lot of movement on properties. That's the reason we are busy every single day.
Excellent. I'm going to open it up, make sure everybody that's listening, and we appreciate all of our attendees. There is a Q&A box. You'll see it across the bottom of the panel. If somebody wants to plug a question in that we've forgotten to ask, or we should ask, or you've got something. There's been a couple of questions about the slide deck, the PowerPoint slides. Sabrina and Mick, you have no problems with us sharing that, I would imagine, correct? So,
No, that's fine.
excellent. We will get those posted on the Miami-Dade CCIM webpage, or you can email me and I'll make sure that you get a copy of those if anybody has any of those questions about the slides. And we have another couple. Let's see who else here. Any comments on residential investments or high rises? Any predictions on those? Although we're mostly commercial, but we'll see what your thoughts are on residential investments and high rises. Start with Sabrina, go ahead.
Sure. So I think what we've seen a lot of is initially, there's been a lot of movement in high-end residential, particularly high-end single-family homes. The markets have been actually pretty strong. I think there were a lot of people, a lot of Northeasterners who were in New York City who really were hit hard by a pandemic, that were living in, you know, smaller spaces, confined spaces, and perhaps they don't want to, They want to have the availability to be able to utilize their home, a bigger space, have a backyard, have a pool, that they're not stuck indoors like that. And so we've seen a lot of movement in really the very high-end sector. I think it's all dependent also on the area. I think that there are certain areas that have not been thriving as far as multifamily condos go. I think look, we're a land of, we've put up 1 million condos in a very quick time period. And for time period, there was a lot of foreign money coming in to buy up property. Then those countries, it's very hard now to get money out of. So there was a stalling of that. If you look in Sunny Isles in particular, a ton of new construction in Sunny Isles dating back to maybe like, let's say 2016, very, very high-end residential. But the market is not held strong there. The market is really from the developer sales to the secondary sales, a precipitous drop in values. So it just really depends on an individual market sometimes too.
Mick, your thoughts on high-rise and residential investments?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, a lot of times with residential, and I used to be a realtor in the 80s and sold single-family residential, so I do have a little bit of experience on this front. But I would say that what I told people back then is, you know, if you're buying residential for you and your family because you need a place to live and work from and so on, then you know what, you need to make your best decision at the moment that you're about to buy your home or your residential property. However, if this is an investment sort of situation, you're trying to, you know, figure out whether this is a good time to buy or sell or different things like that, then, you know, a lot of other matrix come into play. And in this situation, I think there are a lot of anomalous situations that you can take advantage of. You know, Pedro correctly indicated that we have a tremendous amount of offshore investment. And so that can be positive in a few different ways. And one of the ways is, for example, when Venezuela's economy went collapse, you had a lot of Venezuelans that interestingly had deposits on condominiums in the Miami area. Well, those condominium deposits were were US dollars. And so they could now convert those US dollars in any way that they saw fit. And they were actually going to make a lot of money by even just selling their deposit because it was in a US currency compared to their the Venezuelan currency. So again, there are opportunities within Miami just simply because we're such a diverse community and you have, you know, so many different types of buyers and sellers that if you're an active purchaser and you have a great realtor then or broker, what have you, then you have a really good opportunity to get out there and find those diamonds in the rough, if you will.
And we have a new one, and I realize it's 2 minutes after 11, so we'd like to wrap up. But Pedro got another question about, will there be any extensions for value challenging or actual paying of taxes, as there have been no evictions, etc.? I know you were talking about that at the beginning. Any thoughts on that?
We have to wait until to see what the legislator's going to do. They're going to have a meeting immediately after the November election that most of them going to be elected. So we plan to visit Tallahassee. Hopefully we can use the planes to fly there, or otherwise we're going to have to go by car. But we're going to be meeting with them. We are having conversation with them to see what the ideas that they have. So far, it's a little bit too early to see what's going to be their decisions are going to be the move they're going to make. So, but we are still making movements to try to help somehow. And as a government, my recommendation to everybody to tie their belts. And this is the time that we have to help everybody.
And I guess we should also bring up, you are on the ballot for re-election. Is that correct? It's August for the same day as the primary. So we want to wish you the best of luck on that for, I believe it's April 18th is the election day, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Thank you.
That's another pandemic that we have.
Yes, we do have one other question popped in about, do appraisers envision forecasting cash flow over longer time frames? I think you alluded to this, using a discount cash flow model for valuation instead of direct capitalization model, especially with all the uncertainty. I think you partially answered part of that a little bit earlier, but go ahead and take it.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I did allude to it. So if I was a tax appeal person like Sabrina, I'd probably use a direct cap, which is only a 1-year cash flow scenario, because that'll keep the value down. But honestly, if I'm valuing a property and you're being reasonable and you're using credible and supportable data to provide an overall value for refinancing or acquisition purposes or whatever, yeah, I think you have to do a discounted cash flow, because it's not fair to hurt a property because of a singular event. And then, you know, I mean, you could imagine if the only time that you could appraise your property was the day after September 11th or something like that. It's not fair to do that. So in that sense, it makes sense to look at, you know, a situation where the property is back at stabilization. In this situation, probably maybe 3, you know, if we tend to do a lot of resort work. So, you know, in this situation, probably take most resorts a good 2 or 3 years to get back to stabilization. So you want to have a discounted cash flow that gets you at least 2 or 3 years past that. So, you know, 7 to 10 years is probably realistic. And that's what I would strongly recommend to anybody that's ordering an appraisal right now, even if it's a small investment property. We as appraisers can easily do a discounted cash flow, even on a single tenant property that's, you know, only worth $400,000 or $500,000. That's not a problem. We can do that.
Okay, great.
And Michael?
Yes, go ahead, Sabrina.
I would just suggest you just picking up on something that Mick said. Yes, from where I sit, for our purposes, we're going to look at a direct cap approach, because really in the property tax world, each year stands on its own, and we're looking at a snapshot at time of January 1st. So for that particular year, we want to see what the property is doing in light of an overall market too, and we're going to look at that snapshot in time. That's not to say for 2021, which I think we're likely to see values take a drop because of what we're going through right now, that in 2022, God willing, the 2021 year is back to a more stabilized normal environment. The property appraiser, again, looks at that year on its own and has the ability to increase the market value at that time.
Great. We have one other question. It seems a little specific about 2 houses and a significant gap on the 2 houses that are next door to each other. So I don't know, Pedro, if you want to tackle that. It seems very specific to me, and it could be a small, I don't know. Well, it just says, my neighbor pays almost no property taxes, and we have similar properties next door to each other. Do you want to try and give that one an answer?
Well, that depends when the neighbor bought the property. If the neighbor bought the property since 1994, that we established the homestead, and the neighbor is under the homestead, he will have a cap on no more than 3%. So that will make a lot of difference to somebody that bought the property a long time ago, or somebody that bought the property just a few years ago. And that will make a tremendous difference on the taxable value and the taxes they will be paid.
Yeah, well, again, I want to thank everybody. You guys have been wonderful and a lot of great information. I've gotten several texts, people thanking me for the great information that you all have helped us out with. And we want to thank you very much. And it's about 11:15, so we've gone over, and that just goes to the credit, the great information that you helped bring out for us today. So Sabrina, thank you very much. Mick and Pedro, thank you all. You've been incredibly gracious
thank you
and wonderful.
for your job too, and to give the opportunity for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so, again, my name is Michael Henton. I'm the president for Miami-Dade CCIM, and we want wish you all the best of luck out there in this great $308 billion industry that we're all in here in Miami-Dade. So thank you all, and everybody have a great day. Stay safe.
And be safe.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
So-
Thank you.